Have you ever stopped to think about why, precisely when you were at the peak of your addiction, something inside you simply shattered? Why does God allow His chosen ones to fall so deep before lifting them up? There is a hidden pattern in this that nobody tells you about. The shocking truth is this: your addiction was never just a weakness. It was a mask, a psychological armor that you built to avoid facing something much greater, your true calling. And God knows this. What you are about to discover will turn upside down everything you were taught about addictions and purpose. Because when God decides to strip away the addictions of His chosen ones, He is not just healing, He is exposing, revealing, preparing you for something your conscious mind cannot yet comprehend. In this video, we will dive into the psychological and spiritual backstage of this brutal transformation process. Be prepared. What you are going to discover about yourself may be disturbing but absolutely liberating. Every human being walks through life wearing masks. We learn early that showing our true face can be dangerous, painful, or simply too overwhelming for others to handle. So we adapt. We create versions of ourselves that feel safer, more acceptable, more manageable. But what happens when one of these masks becomes so thick, so convincing, that even you forget what lies beneath? Your addiction is not what you think it is. Yes, it causes pain. Yes, it destroys relationships and damages your body. Yes, it steals your time and your money and your peace, but underneath all of that destruction lies something most people never see: a protection mechanism. Your psyche, in its desperate attempt to shield you from something even more terrifying than the addiction itself, created this pattern. It built this wall. Think about the moment before you reach for your substance of choice, before you engage in that compulsive behavior one more time. What are you running from? What thought, what feeling, what memory are you trying to silence? Most people never ask this question because they are too busy hating themselves for being weak. But weakness has nothing to do with it. Your addiction is actually a sign of how strong your psyche is, how creative it became in protecting you from a truth you were not ready to face. The uncomfortable reality is that addiction serves a purpose. It numbs the pain of living a life that is not truly yours. It quiets the voice that keeps whispering you are meant for something greater. It drowns out the calling that terrifies you more than any drug or behavior ever could. Because answering a calling means change. It means letting go of the identity you have built. It means stepping into the unknown with no guarantee of success or safety or approval. For years, maybe decades, you have been medicating against your own destiny. You have been running from the very thing that would give your life meaning. And God, in His infinite wisdom, let you run. He watched you build your walls higher and higher, knowing that one day, when the time was right, those walls would have to come down. Not because He is cruel, but because you cannot step into your purpose while hiding behind a mask. The mask protects you, yes, but it also imprisons you. It keeps you small, it keeps you safe but stuck. It gives you the illusion of control while robbing you of your true power. And somewhere deep in your soul you know this. You have always known this. That is why the addiction never truly satisfies. That is why, no matter how much you use or how often you engage in the behavior, there is always that hollow feeling afterward. That emptiness that no substance can fill. God did not give you this addiction, but He allowed it to develop because He knew it would eventually lead you to a breaking point, a moment where the mask would crack, where the pain of staying the same would finally become greater than the fear of change. That moment is not a punishment. It is an invitation to stop running and start facing what you have been avoiding all along. Your addiction has been your companion, your escape, your false comfort. But it has also been your prison guard, keeping you locked away from the life you were meant to live. And now, as God begins to strip it away, you are not losing something. You are being freed from something. The mask is being removed, And for the first time in perhaps your entire life, you are about to see your real face, the face of someone chosen, the face of someone called, the face of someone who was always meant for more than survival mode and coping mechanisms. This stripping away feels like death because, in a way, it is. The version of you that needed the addiction is dying. The identity you built around your pain and your fear and your shame is dissolving. But what lies beneath that death is not emptiness. It is potential, it is purpose, it is the raw, unfiltered truth of who you really are and what you came here to do. And that truth has been waiting patiently, buried under layers of protection, ready to emerge the moment you stop running. After the mask begins to crack, something unexpected happens. Instead of immediate relief or instant transformation, you find yourself in a wasteland. Everything that once gave your life structure, even if that structure was dysfunctional, suddenly disappears. Your routines collapse, your relationships shift, your sense of self becomes foggy and uncertain. This is the desert, and it is not an accident, it is a requirement. God does not renovate, He rebuilds from the ground up. And before He can construct something new in your life, He must first clear the land. Every false belief, every toxic pattern, every borrowed dream that never truly belonged to you must be removed. This removal process feels brutal because you are losing things you thought were essential to your survival. You are losing the very things you used to define yourself. The desert is where you discover what you are actually made of. When all external supports are gone, when the addiction no longer works to numb you, when the distractions fade and the noise quiets, you are left alone with yourself. For many, this is the most terrifying experience of their entire lives, because in that silence, in that emptiness, you cannot hide anymore, you cannot pretend, you cannot perform, you simply are. In this space, your mind will try every trick to pull you back to the familiar. It will tell you that you were better off before. It will romanticize the addiction, making you forget the pain it caused. It will whisper that this transformation is not worth the suffering, that you should just go back to what you know. This is not weakness talking. This is the ego desperately trying to maintain control over a process it cannot control. But the desert serves a sacred purpose. It strips away everything that is not truly you. Every borrowed identity, every people-pleasing mask, every version of yourself that you created to survive in environments that were never meant for you. One by one, these false selves die in the desert heat. And with each death comes a strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for the life you thought you wanted, relief that you no longer have to pretend. What makes the desert necessary is not just the removal of the old, but the preparation for the new. Your calling is not something you can carry into your old life. It requires a completely different operating system. Different beliefs, different habits, different relationships, different priorities. You cannot download new software onto corrupted hardware. The hardware itself must be rebuilt. This is why God empties you completely. He is making room. Room for vision, room for purpose, room for a level of clarity and power you have never experienced before. But that room can only be created by removing what currently fills the space. Your addiction-filled space, your coping mechanisms filled space, your false identities filled space. All of that must go. Many people try to skip the desert. They want the transformation without the emptiness. They want the calling without the stripping. They look for shortcuts, quick fixes, ways to speed through the uncomfortable parts. But the desert cannot be rushed. It operates on divine timing, not human preference. And anyone who tries to escape it prematurely will find themselves right back at the beginning, facing the same lessons again. In the desert, you learn the difference between who you are and who you thought you had to be. You discover that much of what you called your personality was actually just trauma responses and survival strategies. You realize that the voice you thought was your intuition was often just fear dressed up as wisdom. You see clearly, perhaps for the first time, how much of your life was built on foundations of sand. This seeing is painful. It brings up shame and regret and anger. You might rage at the years you wasted, the opportunities you missed, the relationships you damaged. You might feel like you are starting over from zero, like everyone else is ahead of you, like it is too late. But these thoughts are just the death throes of the old self. They are the final protests of an identity that knows its time is up. The truth is that nothing is wasted. Every wrong turn, every painful lesson, every moment of addiction was shaping you for this very moment. Your past does not disqualify you from your calling. It qualifies you, because your calling will require you to have walked through darkness. It will require you to understand suffering. It will require you to have compassion for those who are still wearing masks and running from themselves. God empties you in the desert so that when He fills you, there is room for something greater than you ever imagined. Not the dreams you had when you were hiding, not the goals you set while wearing your mask, but a purpose so aligned with your true nature that it feels both completely foreign and deeply familiar at the same time. A calling that you were always meant for, but could never have accessed while still clinging to your old life. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the S.I.M method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. Beneath every addiction lives a shadow. Not the addiction itself, but what the addiction was protecting you from seeing. This shadow is not evil. It is not something to be feared or destroyed. It is simply the part of you that you rejected, buried, and refused to acknowledge. And until you face it, you cannot be whole. You cannot step into your calling while half of your psyche remains locked in darkness. Your shadow contains everything you were taught was unacceptable. The anger you were told to suppress, the desires you were shamed for having, the power you were convinced was dangerous. The parts of your personality that did not fit into your family, your culture, your religion, all of these rejected pieces did not disappear. They went underground, into the unconscious, where they continued to influence your life in ways you never recognized. The addiction was a compromise between your conscious self and your shadow. It gave your shadow a tiny outlet, a way to express itself without fully emerging. When you drank, you could be angry without taking responsibility for it. When you used drugs, you could feel powerful without owning that power. When you engaged in compulsive behaviors, you could touch your desires without fully embracing them. The addiction became a safe space for your shadow to exist without threatening your carefully constructed identity. But shadows always demand integration eventually. The longer you ignore them, the louder they become. The more you push them down, the more destructively they emerge. Your addiction was actually your shadow trying to get your attention, trying to show you that something essential was missing from your conscious life. It was a message written in the language of pain and compulsion, begging you to look deeper. When God strips away the addiction, He is removing the buffer between you and your shadow. He is forcing a confrontation you have been avoiding your entire life. And this confrontation is not optional if you want to fulfill your calling. Because your calling requires all of you, not just the acceptable parts, not just the parts that people praise, but the whole package, light and shadow integrated into one complete human being. Facing your shadow feels dangerous because you have spent years believing that these parts of you are bad. You were convinced that if people saw your anger, they would reject you. If they knew about your desires, they would judge you. If they witnessed your power, they would try to control you. So you hid, you performed, you became smaller and quieter and safer, and the addiction helped you maintain that performance while giving your shadow just enough expression to keep you from exploding. But here is what nobody tells you about the shadow. It contains not just your darkness, but your light. Yes, you buried your rage there, but you also buried your passion. Yes, you hid your selfish desires there, but you also hid your authentic needs. Yes, you suppressed your power there, but you also suppressed your gifts. The shadow holds everything you rejected, and often what you rejected was not actually bad. It was just inconvenient or threatening to the status quo. Your calling cannot emerge from a fractured psyche. It requires integration. It requires you to reclaim the parts of yourself that you gave away or locked away in order to be loved, accepted, or safe. This reclamation is not about becoming reckless or destructive. It is about becoming whole. It's about learning to express your anger in healthy ways, to honor your desires without shame, to own your power without apology. The process of integration is messy. You will overshoot sometimes, swinging too far in the direction of traits you once suppressed. You will make mistakes as you learn to balance these newly acknowledged aspects of yourself. You will hurt people and have to apologize. You will scare yourself with the intensity of what emerges. But this mess is necessary. You cannot learn to drive by reading about it. You have to get behind the wheel and practice, even if you hit a few curbs along the way. As you integrate your shadow, something remarkable happens. You become more authentic, more powerful, more magnetic. People are drawn to you in a different way than before, not because you are performing or pleasing, but because you are real. You are whole. You are no longer leaking energy, trying to keep parts of yourself hidden. All of that energy is now available for your purpose. Your calling was always waiting on the other side of your shadow work. It could not come through while you were fragmented, while half of your power was locked away in the unconscious. But now, as you reclaim those lost pieces, as you integrate what was rejected, you are becoming the kind of person who can handle what God wants to give you. Because your calling is not small. It is not safe. It will require every ounce of who you are, light and shadow united. The addiction kept you split. It maintained the divide between your conscious self and your shadow. But God, in His infinite wisdom, knew that split could not last forever. He knew that eventually the pressure would build, the mask would crack, and you would have no choice but to face what you had been running from all along. And in that facing, in that integration, you would finally become ready for what you were always meant to do. When the addiction finally releases its grip, when the mask cracks open, when the desert empties you out, you encounter something you have been avoiding for years. Silence. Real, penetrating, uncomfortable silence. No more noise to drown out your thoughts. No more substances to numb your feelings. No more compulsive behaviors to distract you from yourself. Just you and the echoing quiet of your own mind. This silence is deafening because you have spent so long filling every moment with sound, activity, chaos. You built your entire life around avoiding this exact experience. You kept yourself busy, entertained, distracted, medicated, anything to prevent this moment of stillness. Because in the stillness, things rise to the surface. Memories you buried, feelings you denied, truths you refused to acknowledge. The silence does not let you hide. At first, the silence feels like punishment. Your mind screams for stimulation, for something, anything, to interrupt the quiet. You feel restless, anxious, crawling out of your skin. This is withdrawal, but not just from the substance or behavior. This is withdrawal from the addiction to noise itself. You have been running from silence for so long that sitting in it feels like torture. But if you stay in the silence long enough, if you resist the urge to fill it with new distractions, something shifts. The panic subsides, the restlessness calms. And in that calm, you begin to hear something you have not heard in years. Your own voice. Not the voice of your trauma. Not the voice of your conditioning, not the voice of other people's expectations. Your actual voice. The one that knows who you are and what you need and where you are supposed to go. This voice has been speaking to you your entire life, but you could not hear it over the noise. It whispered during every high, every binge, every compulsive episode, trying to get your attention. It said, "Stop, this is not you, there is another way." But you were too deep in the pattern to listen. You had to hit bottom, had to lose the addiction, had to sit in the silence before you could finally hear what it was trying to tell you. The silence after the fall is where God speaks. Not in thunder or lightning or burning bushes, in the quiet, in the space between thoughts, in the stillness that you fought so hard to avoid. He speaks in impressions, in knowing, in gentle guidance that feels both foreign and familiar. He shows you glimpses of who you are becoming, of what your life could look like if you stopped running and started listening. But hearing is only the first step. The real work is learning to trust what you hear, because that voice will ask things of you that your logical mind cannot understand. It will call you to paths that make no sense on paper. It will require you to release control and follow intuition, to act on faith rather than certainty. And after years of addiction, after years of making terrible choices, trusting yourself feels impossible. This is the cruel irony of the silence. Just when you finally have access to your inner guidance, you have no confidence in your ability to follow it. The addiction destroyed your self-trust. It proved over and over that you could not rely on your own judgment. So now, when your calling begins to emerge in the quiet, part of you dismisses it. Part of you says this is just another delusion, another mistake waiting to happen. Working through this lack of self-trust takes time. You cannot rush it. You have to rebuild slowly, making small promises to yourself and keeping them. Listening to your inner voice on minor decisions before you can trust it with major ones. Proving to yourself gradually that the voice of your true self is different from the voice of your addiction. One leads to peace, even when it is challenging. The other leads to chaos, even when it feels good temporarily. In the silence, you also encounter grief. Grief for the years lost. Grief for the person you could have been if you had listened sooner. Grief for the relationships damaged and the opportunities missed. This grief is heavy and real and necessary. You cannot bypass it with positive thinking or spiritual bypassing. You have to feel it fully, let it move through you, acknowledge what was lost before you can truly move forward. But underneath the grief lives something else. Gratitude. Gratitude that you made it out. Gratitude that you are still alive, still breathing, still capable of change. Gratitude that God did not give up on you, even when you gave up on yourself. This gratitude does not erase the grief, but it coexists with it, creating a complex emotional landscape that is far more mature than anything you felt during your addiction. The silence teaches you that life is not about constant stimulation or perpetual highs. It teaches you that peace is found in the quiet moments, in the ordinary routines, in the simple act of being present with yourself. Your addiction promised you excitement, escape, intensity, but what it delivered was emptiness. The silence offers the opposite. It appears empty but delivers depth, meaning connection to something greater than yourself. As you learn to sit in the silence, as you become comfortable with your own company, something remarkable happens. The calling that was always there, buried under layers of noise and addiction and fear, begins to crystallize. It moves from a vague sense of dissatisfaction to a clear knowing of what you are meant to do. Not all at once, not in a dramatic revelation, but slowly, consistently, like the sun rising over the desert you just walked through. This clarity only comes through silence. There are no shortcuts. You cannot think your way to your calling or logic your way to your purpose. You have to sit in the uncomfortable quiet and let it do its work. Let it strip away the false voices and reveal the true one. Let it show you who you are beneath the addiction, beneath the trauma, beneath the years of running. Let it prepare you for what comes next. Every spiritual tradition talks about rebirth, transformation, becoming a new person. They make it sound mystical and magical, like you will wake up one day glowing with purpose and clarity. But they leave out the most important part. Rebirth is violent, it is messy, it is painful in ways that no one warned you about. Because before you can be reborn, something has to die. And death, even when it is necessary, is never pretty. You are in the birth canal right now. The old you is dying, the new you is trying to emerge, and you are stuck between two worlds. You no longer fit in your old life, but you have not fully stepped into your new one yet. You have outgrown your old friends, your old habits, your old ways of thinking, but you have not yet found your new community or your new rhythm. This in-between space is excruciating because you belong nowhere. The people who knew you before do not recognize you anymore. They want the old you back, the predictable you, the you they could understand and relate to. They are uncomfortable with your changes, threatened by your growth. Some will actively try to pull you back, reminding you of who you used to be, offering you the very things you are trying to leave behind. They do not do this out of malice. They do it out of fear. Your transformation forces them to look at their own lives, their own masks, their own avoided callings. Letting go of these relationships feels like another death. These are people who were there during your darkest times, who witnessed your struggle, who maybe even tried to help. But now you are on a different path, and they cannot walk it with you. Not because they are bad people, but because they are not called to the same journey. And holding on to them out of loyalty or guilt will only delay your rebirth. Your body is also rebelling during this process. Years of addiction left their mark, and now as your system recalibrates, you feel everything. Anxiety without the medication to numb it, sadness without the escape hatch, physical pain without the substance to dull it. Your nervous system is learning to regulate itself naturally, and that learning curve is steep. Some days you feel like you are going crazy, like you made a mistake by giving up the addiction, like you cannot survive without it. But you can, and you are. Every day that you stay in the discomfort, every moment that you resist the urge to go back, you are proving that you are stronger than you ever imagined. The addiction convinced you that you were weak, that you needed it to function. The rebirth is showing you the truth. You are capable of withstanding pain you never thought possible. You are resilient in ways you never knew. The mental aspect of rebirth is perhaps the most brutal. Your entire belief system is being dismantled and rebuilt. Things you were certain about suddenly seem questionable. People you trusted are revealed to be toxic. Paths you thought were right turn out to be dead ends. You question everything, doubt everything, wonder if anything you believed was actually true. This cognitive dissonance is exhausting. Your brain wants certainty, wants solid ground to stand on, but rebirth requires you to float in uncertainty for longer than feels comfortable. During this phase, you will be tempted to create a new identity quickly, to fill the void left by the old one. You will want to label yourself, to find a new box to fit into, to establish a new normal as fast as possible. Resist this urge. Premature identity formation will only create another mask, another false self that will eventually need to be stripped away. The rebirth requires you to stay in the formless state, to remain undefined, to let your new self emerge organically rather than forcing it into existence. This is where faith becomes essential. Not religious faith necessarily, though it can be, but faith that there is a process at work, that the chaos has a purpose, that you are being guided even when you cannot see where you are going. Faith that God did not bring you this far only to abandon you now. Faith that the stripping, the desert, the silence, the brutal rebirth are all preparation for something worth the suffering. The darkest part of rebirth is when you glimpse your calling but feel completely unqualified to pursue it. You see what you are meant to do, but you also see the gap between who you are now and who you need to become. That gap feels impossible to cross. You think about your past mistakes, your current limitations, your lack of resources or skills or connections. You think about all the people who are already doing what you are called to do, who seem so much more qualified, so much further ahead. You think about how late you are starting, how much ground you need to make up. These thoughts are the final test. They are the last barrier between you and your calling, because your calling is not about being qualified. It is about being obedient. It is not about being the best or the most talented or the most prepared. It is about being willing to take the first step even when you cannot see the full staircase. Willing to use what you have even when it feels like not enough. Willing to begin even when you feel utterly inadequate. The brutality of rebirth serves a purpose. It burns away everything that is not essential. It removes every excuse, every crutch, every backup plan. It strips you down to your core so that when you finally step into your calling, you step into it with nothing but your raw, authentic self. No masks, no pretense, no false confidence, just you, humble and broken, open and ready to be used. This is why God allows the process to be so painful, because your calling will require humility. It will require you to know your limitations, to acknowledge your past, to stay grounded even as you rise. If the rebirth was easy, if it was beautiful and painless, you would step into your calling with pride. You would think you did it on your own, that you earned it, that you deserve it. But the brutality teaches you that none of this is about you. It is about what God wants to do through you. You are just the vessel, and vessels are most useful when they are empty. After everything burns down, something emerges from the ashes, not something new, something that was always there. Your calling was never created through this process. It was uncovered. It was waiting beneath all the layers of protection and pain and false identity. And now, finally, it can breathe. Your calling is not what you thought it would be. It does not look like the dreams you had before, the goals you set while still wearing your mask. Those were borrowed dreams, copies of what you saw other people doing. Your real calling is strange and specific and perfectly suited to who you actually are, not who you pretended to be. The first surprise about your calling is that it connects directly to your pain. Everything you suffered through, every mistake you made, every rock bottom you hit becomes material for your purpose. The addiction that almost destroyed you becomes the very thing that qualifies you to help others who are still trapped. The shame you carried becomes empathy. The brokenness becomes wisdom. Nothing was wasted. This is why the stripping had to be so complete. If God had left your old identity intact, you would have tried to fulfill your calling from that place. You would have brought your ego, your need for approval, your fear of judgment. But your calling cannot be fulfilled from that place. It requires you to show up authentic, vulnerable, real. It requires you to use your mess as your message. Your calling will make you uncomfortable at first. It will ask you to do things that expose you, that put you in positions where people can see your scars. Every instinct in you will want to hide, to protect yourself, to present a polished version of your journey. But your calling demands the opposite. It demands truth. As you begin to step into your calling, you will encounter resistance from yourself. Part of you will want to play it safe, to find something more acceptable, more conventional, less risky. But those safer paths are not your calling. They are detours. They are your fear trying to protect you one more time. This is what it means to be chosen. Not that you are better than anyone else, but that you have been marked for a specific purpose that required specific preparation. The addiction, the stripping, the brutal transformation were all part of that preparation, and now the real work begins. Not the work of becoming someone new, but the work of being who you always were, underneath everything else.